Hello, it's Reverend Gareth here bringing you this week's collective worship. I wonder how you're all settling in. It's a shame that we can't come into school at the minute and do collective worship, but this is the next best thing. We record one and send it to you. I hope you're all keeping well. I hope the first week has gone well. It's been good to be back with your friends and back to learning. I hope you are being as awesome as you usually are. This morning for collective worship, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a Bible story. I'm going to put a song on there, but not for singing, but for actions. And then I've got some prayers at the end. That's roughly where we're going. And today's theme is about rules. Rules that make a difference to our community. Rules that make us better as a community. Now, as you are aware, as everyone's aware, there are lots of rules at the minute about who we can see, who we can't see, which bubble we're in, which bubble we're not in. And at the minute, the government just announced a rule of 6, that you can only meet 6 people from in your house or outside of your house. And we've got all these different rules, and they're there designed to help people, keep them safe, keep us not spreading a virus to one another, and to try and get rid of the coronavirus. That's why these rules are put in there. And later on, I'm going to be looking at some rules and how it is that we keep the rules, how's the best way of keeping the rules, and what difference that would make to our lives and to the school and to our homes and things like that. So that's what we're going to do in a little while. But before we do that, we're going to play a song. Now, I quite like when I come into the collective worship to get you all doing some crazy actions. And my favourite one is the burger song. So we're going to do the burger song. Now, if you're allowed to sing, I don't know if you are or not. If you're allowed to sing, you can sing along. But you're all definitely allowed to do the actions. And they're not complicated. So give it a go. God's love is bigger than a burger. But first of all, here is our opening responses. God is love. All the time. All the time, God is love. Great. Let's sing that song.
God's love is bigger than a burger, it is bigger than a mouse, bigger than an elephant and bigger than a house, bigger than a bus and bigger than a tree, bigger than a mountain, bigger than the sea. What about a cloud? What about the sky? What about the earth? What about the moon? What about the sun? And what about the stars? Is anything bigger than this big love? No. Big and wonderful, big and wonderful, big and wonderful, wonderful love. Big and wonderful, big and wonderful, big and wonderful love, love, love. God's love is bigger than a burger, it is bigger than a mouse, bigger than an elephant and bigger than a house, bigger than a bus and bigger than a tree, bigger than a mountain, bigger than the sea. What about a cloud? What about the sky? What about the earth? What about the moon? What about the sun? And what about the stars? Is anything bigger than this big love? No. Big and wonderful, big and wonderful, big and wonderful, wonderful love. Big and wonderful, big and wonderful, big and wonderful love, love, love. Is this big love all big enough to handle all my doubts and worries? Is this big love all big enough to help with all my fears? Yes! Big and wonderful, big and wonderful, big and wonderful love. Big and wonderful, big and wonderful, big and wonderful love, love, love.
In the Bible, a long time ago in Exodus, God gave the Israelites, God's people, rules, 10 commandments we call them. And his 10 rules are how best he expects human beings to live in order to get the best maximum life. This is what God says. And later on when Jesus came, some of the people who were listening to him said, you know, I keep all the rules. Which one are most important. And Jesus says it's to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, and then to love your neighbour as yourself. And this morning, or this afternoon, I don't know when you're listening, I just want to go through these rules. So first of all, got this one. God is number one. That's the first commandment. Number one, the first commandment. God is number one. There is no other gods like God. That's the first commandment. Number two, you should have no other gods other than God himself. So have no more idols. That's what the rules say. Number three, it says that you should not use the Lord's name in vain. So you shouldn't use it as anything other than praising him. So not as a swear word or as a different kind of word. So there you go. And number four is that you should keep the Sabbath day, the holy day, holy. Spend it for God. Now these first four that I just showed you, these numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4, they can all be summed up with loving the Lord your God with all your heart. And then the next lot can be summed up with by loving your neighbour as yourself. And in a letter that one of Jesus's apostles, Paul, writes to the churches in Rome, he says, actually, the way to keep the next lot is by loving, because when you love, you do no harm to anybody else, and therefore you keep the rules, you keep the law. So number 5 is that you should honour your mum and dad. You should be good to your family. Now, if you want to keep this law, Paul says in his letter that you have to love. Because when you love, you do no wrong to anyone else. So then you are definitely going to keep this law. You are definitely going to be a good person in your family. Number 6 says this: do not murder. Now, this is quite an easy one. I hope none of you are murdering. But if you think about it, do not do any harm to people. Don't hurt people. And Paul says if you're going to do that, then you've got to love. Because when you love, you do no harm to anyone else. And if you're doing no harm to anyone else, you're definitely not going to murder. You're not going to start fighting. Love makes sure that you keep this law. Number 7 is do not steal anyone else's wife or husband. Do not commit adultery is what it says. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to keep that law and not commit adultery, then you have to love. Because if you love, then you'll do no harm to someone else, so you won't hurt their feelings. The next, number 8, gets a bit more tricky now. Do not steal. You see the hand trying to steal the sweets out of my number 8 jar. And if we are going to try and keep this rule, not to steal, then the best way to do it is to love. Because love does no wrong to anyone, and therefore you keep the rules. Because if stealing something from someone else upset them, and if you don't want to do any harm to them by loving them, then you wouldn't steal. So love does no harm to anyone else. Number 9 is telling lies. Oh, it's a tricky one not to keep, but Paul says in his letter, love does no harm to anyone else, and therefore it helps you make sure that you keep the rules. Because if we're loving other people, then we won't be telling them lies, because we don't want to hurt their feelings, we don't want to trick them or deceive them. Number 10 in the rules was don't be jealous of what other people have got. Can you see this number 0 here is looking at number 1 thinking, oh, nice necklace, nice hair, I would like to look like that. Being jealous. And Paul says the way to do that is, the way to keep making sure that you're not jealous is to love, because love does no wrong to anyone else. Love is the answer. Love helps us to keep the rules. And if you think about the coronavirus and the rules that we're doing, it's out of love for other people that we're doing it, because we want to keep them safe and not spread a virus around. So let's think about it for a moment. What would our homes look like if it was filled with love and we did no harm to one another? What would our schools look like if we were full of love and doing no harm to one another? What would our world look like if it was full of people who just loved one another and did no harm to one another? Maybe that's a challenge for us this week, to make sure that we are constantly putting love first, loving one another, making sure that we do no harm to one another. Then we'll keep the rules. And may our communities in school be filled with love for one another. Let me say a prayer, and if you agree with it, you can say amen at the end. Dear God, we thank you for your rules, and that those rules help us to live the best life possible. And we ask that you'll fill us with your love so that we may love one another and therefore keep those rules. Help us to be people of love and communities of love, just like you love us. We ask this in your name. Amen. Thank you for tuning in. I'm sure Reverend Tony will be back next week, and then it'll be me the week after. Keep safe, remember to be loving, and let's finish with these words. God is love. All the time. All the time, God is love. So let us go and show that love to one another today and always. Amen.